So despite its flaws, which we will absolutely be breaking down in this movie review, I do actually think Wish is a relatively enjoyable Disney animated musical fantasy movie that also serves as a celebration of 100 years of Disney, which I think is really, really brilliant. And I don't think it was overly stuffed with IP references in an annoying way that Space Jam: A New Legacy absolutely was. But what I do think is a bit of a shame is that the premise of this movie had the potential to be absolutely epic and out of this world, and I do think that they missed the mark on that somewhat, as ultimately the crux of the disappointment with this movie is that I think it's made and centered more around kids than families, which of course the old historical brilliant animated Disney movies definitely did cater for the entire family and did have that sophistication to it that allowed it to be so memorable and so timeless, which I think Wish unfortunately just misses the mark on a little bit. And speaking of those iconic legacy movies, of course they were in 2D animation, which Wish does celebrate, and I do actually think it was really, really cool to revisit the 2D animation style. Although what was a little bit disappointing is that I feel somewhat unfinished for me in this movie, but what is interesting is how you take 2D animation and then you do infuse a bit of a modern twist to it. I still do think that Raya the Last Dragon had the best animation style, and how Disney are going to go in the future, I hope that they continue with that style, as I do think it was absolutely brilliant, but nonetheless, it was really cool to see 2D animation here once again. So even though this movie wasn't stuffed with IP references, I do actually really appreciate all of the little nods to the past and Easter egg references to Disney's catalogue, which I thought was really, really fun. For example, Jafar's staff, the 7 dwarfs / friends that the main lead character has, talking animals, Tangled, everything had a little bit of a modern twist, like I said. But it was really, really cool to see her here nonetheless. And I also love that it had betrayal for the main lead character, which really does break the character's heart. But that being said, I really do think that they could have just gone there so much more with the betrayal. Maybe had a couple more in there, but also just had much more of an impact on the character and all of the world too. And I love that it also really does have a lot of musical numbers in there, like the classic original animated Disney movies did do. Although I only think 1 or 2 really do stick with you, as the rest of them aren't as catchy as the brilliant old original 90s movies in particular had really, really catchy tunes, which made them so iconic still to this day. Whereas I do think Wish unfortunately does miss the mark on that. I really liked Star. I thought Star was a really cute and really hilarious, brilliant character, even though this character was mute and somewhat a little bit like a mute genie. I thought the 7 friends were fine as supporting characters, but they had no personalities, which is really iconic as they are of course based on the 7 dwarves who are packed with personality, which is just such a shame as these 7 friends could have added so much more, but ultimately they were pretty forgettable. I thought the goat was interesting at first, but the character didn't really contribute much at all outside of being a little bit hilarious in the beginning, which was such a shame as he could have been such a memorable character, and especially as talking animals, especially with the Little Mermaid, are really, really brilliant, and especially in Aladdin as well. They are the ones that you really do remember. And I just think Goat just unfortunately wasn't at the same level. I think the Granddad character was trying to be very similar to the Granddad from Up, even though that was from Pixar. But I think unfortunately again, this character just could have been so much better. And he could have just had so much more of an emotionally led storyline. But he was just there, and the mother, gosh, she might as well not have been there, as she didn't really service the storyline at all. All she did do was just having one moment where you do really feel sorry for her, when her wish is drained from her and is used for evil, nefarious purposes, and you really do see the impact of that. But like I said, the Granddad and the Mother had the potential to be so brilliant, but they really didn't do that much with them. And very similarly, I do think that they could have pushed so much more with the emotional sequences involving the father, which really does tie back into Asha's motivation. But speaking of Asha, at least she is a really great lead character, a little bit flawed, really relatable, and really determined and driven. So I think she was really, really good, and I think she was represented from an animation perspective really, really well, and you're really rooting for this character. You can really see where she is coming from, but she doesn't have all of the answers, which I think is really, really good, as by comparison, Rey from Star Wars, she was just seeming to be a perfect character from the get-go, so it doesn't really have that much of a character arc, which I think is a big criticism for why the new trilogy didn't perform that well, but at least they didn't make that same mistake with Asha. But who I do think is the best character from this entire movie has to be Magnifico. I think he was such a brilliantly represented character and such a fun, evil villain. If anything, I would have loved even more of an exploration in terms of his backstory to really explain why he is doing all of this stuff, what happened to him in the past, What's his true motivation for wanting to grab everyone's dreams? And what happened from a relationship perspective between him and his wife and his previous apprentices? All of that stuff could have been so good. As like I said, Magnifico was the best represented character here, as he was the most interesting, the most dynamic, and the most layered. So I think it was really, really good. Even though I would have loved even more from it, I do think he is the best character from the bunch. And I thought it was really purposeful, interesting social commentary that all of the white male characters in this movie are represented as evil slash flawed slash villainous characters. And even though this movie definitely had some brilliant moments, especially in the final act, I feel like it just lacked that spectacle epicness that you would come to expect from Disney animated movies. But although what I did really like is that it was just so focused on one kingdom. It wasn't like the end of the world, end of the universe, super over the top. It was really focused and clear as to what it is trying to do, which is just focusing on this kingdom, focusing on an evil, flawed king, and focusing on a relatively new character from the princess perspective, who is going to try and save the day. So I think, you know, the fact that it was a lot more smaller in scale was definitely to its advantage. I do think within that, though, they definitely could have pushed all those aspects, like I mentioned, so much more to make it instantly iconic and super successful as a result. In terms of lessons that people can take away from this movie, I do think it's really, really good in terms of really pursuing your dreams and always remembering in your heart what your dreams and ambitions and wishes were, and never let them disappear, as this can really break a person potentially and can make them really monotonous and just carry on their life in terms of a bit of a robotic format, whereas actually their dreams and their wishes and their ambitions really is where their happiness is able to be unlocked. And this youthful energy and childlike energy should never be lost. So I think all of the messaging actually from Wish is really, really strong. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Wish a solid 5.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Wish? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.